For the second consecutive week here on the Recap Podcast, the Cincinnati Bengals are our headliner for the week. Last week it was because they were in a plus matchup with the Titans and they got crushed in the passing game. This week, they were also in a plus matchup, and because they had struggled there, I was skeptical they'd be able to get things fully running on Sunday, but oh baby, did they. Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, the connection was fantastic. Burrow looked good, which I think is a huge key here, and I think it does change the way we should view the Bengals, both primarily in the short-term future, because, long-term outlook was still pretty good, but now in the short term, I think they're kind of back to being maybe not 100% Bengals, but better than what they were. We're going to break down implications of that big Bengals game, talking about Cooper Kupp and his return, Justin Jefferson's injury, and much more to recap all that went on in week 5 and look forward to week number 6. Welcome on into the Heat Check Fantasy Podcast. That's right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network and FanDuel Research. My name is Jim Sonis. I am a managing editor of digital media for FanDuel Research, here to give you the big takeaways from week number 5 in the NFL, kind of dump out the notebook and outline key takeaways from this week. Before we dive in, though, quick reminder to make sure you are subscribed to the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed. Wherever you get your podcasts, we're available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever else you find your podcast, you can find us. If you like what you hear, I'd encourage you to leave a 5-star rating because that does help us out a bunch. Thank you to those of you who have already done so. Snap into action this NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. The app is so easy to use. There's a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, totals, and more. So visit FanDuel.com and kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. Must be 21 plus and present in select states. FanDuel is offering online sports wagering in Kansas under an agreement with Kansas Star Casino LLC. First online real money wager only. $10 first deposit required. Bonus issued as non-withdrawable bonus bets that expire 7 days after receipt. Restrictions apply. See terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit fanduel.com/RG in Colorado, Iowa, Michigan, New Jersey, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Illinois, Tennessee, and Virginia. Call 1-800-NEXT-STEP. Protect Next Step to 53342 in Arizona. 1-888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org/chat in Connecticut. 1-800-9-WITH-IT in Indiana. 1-800-522-4700. Visit ksgamblinghelp.com in Kansas. 1-877-770-STOP in Louisiana. Visit mdgamblinghelp.org in Maryland, 1-800-GAMBLER.net in West Virginia, 1-800-522-4700 in Wyoming. Hope is here. Visit gamblinghelplinema.org or call 800-327-5050 for 24/7 support in Massachusetts, or call 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY in New York. Let's kick things off here by talking about those Bengals and deciding what to do with them going forward, because they came to life on Sunday and it was a massive day for Jamar Chase. Chase had 19 targets and turned those into 192 yards and 3 touchdowns. Now, it wasn't a lot of bunny targets because it was not a lot of downfield work, but they're getting the ball in his hands and letting him cook, and it's Jamar Chase. So that's probably going to go pretty well. 5 red zone targets for Chase as well. T. Higgins did get in a limited session on Friday, so I think he should be able to return potentially next week. But honestly, more than Chase, more than anything else, was seeing Joe Burrow finally move around a bit in the pocket once again. He had a scramble where he got up, and, you watch him run, you're a little bit nervous, making sure he gets up and is good. He signals first down, walks back to the huddle with his typical swagger. So I think that was a big and very important shift within this offense. And looking forward to week number 6, they're in a pretty fun game. They're hosting the Seattle Seahawks. So I wanted to take a look here at the salaries over at FanDuel.com and play Name That Salary. And again, if you're new to the show, Name That Salary is I toss out a salary I think is deserving of that player, what I'd want to pay for them based on their role, et cetera, et cetera. And if my number is above the number on FanDuel.com, means that player might be a bit overvalued. If I'm under that number, then maybe they are a value. With Jamar Chase, he's getting the Justin Jefferson, Tyreek Hill workload right now. And the passing offense is better than it was previously. So we can kind of put him in the Chase Hill bucket or the Jefferson Hill bucket where you're willing to pay low 9,000s. I would say 91 for Chase under the assumption that T. Higgins is back. Now you can see here if you're watching on FanDuel YouTube or FanDuel TV Plus that you can already see Jamar Chase because he's in the top section over on FanDuel. $9,300 the salary for Jamar Chase. That's right around where I was. So in that matchup, totally fine. I would love to see Higgins get back. Higgins' salary is $7,000. So hopefully we get Higgins back because that would be a nice little way to get exposure to this passing offense without entirely breaking the bank. But Chase is well worth 93 if Higgins does not play. As for Burrow, seeing him move around a bit was a big thing as far as his DFS upside. He looked good passing the ball. So they're at home. Pretty good matchup here with Seattle. It's a fun game with a total right now at 46 with the Bengals favored by 3. I would say Burrow, because I'm still not expecting a lot of rushing, I'd still want him in the 7,000 range. So probably $7,700 or so for Burrow is appropriate, and his salary is 75. So that's actually not bad. And I can get behind that. Given that the passing efficiency was there, he's at home, not a bad matchup. 75 for Burrow, pretty respectable, and I'm okay with that. So I think that is very okay by me with Joe Burrow. Other key takeaway is that Joe Mixon is more viable when the Bengals passing offense is better because it gives them more space to operate, more touchdown chances and stuff like that. So I do think that Mixon benefits from a more efficient passing offense. He also did benefit from Higgins being out because he had 4 targets here, 33 carries plus 2x targets for Mixon, which is adjusted opportunity. So that's a good number. And I think that does point the arrow up for Mixon as well. I would say Mixon's salary probably should be around, I was willing to pay 7,000 this week pretty happily. And you get a better efficient offense. I would say his salary probably should be closer to like 75 or so. And he's 7,000 once again. He didn't score, which means, the total outputs for Mixon have been pretty muted. Only 1 touchdown so far this year, but I believe his red zone role has been fine. Let me just check that quick for Joe Mixon. But in general, I've been pretty okay with his role. Again, I was willing to pay 7,000 this week, 7,000 again next week. Yeah, his red zone share has actually been really good. He had 10 red zone chances on Sunday. Didn't score, but Mixon at 7,000. I know the Seahawks rush defense has been a lot better this year than it was last year, but that's a really good number. So Mixon, I think, is going to be a focal point for me looking forward to week number 6. And just in general, the Bengals will be, given what they did in that Sunday game. Let's dig in now and talk about some injuries from week number 6 or 5. And the big bummer was Justin Jefferson left Sunday with a hamstring injury and did not return. And it sounds like there's a pretty good chance he does miss time. The Vikings threw 47 times Sunday, and Jordan Addison and KJ Osborne tied for the team lead with 9 targets. Addison had 3 deep targets. TJ Hawkinson and Brandon Powell both had 2. So taking Jefferson out is a big downgrade for the entire offense. It's downgrade for Kirk Cousins. I think it rules him out for me, despite a good matchup with the Bears next week. And also, that backfield is not one I want to touch. Alexander Mattison did score on Sunday, but his workload overall was pretty poor. So no running backs, even in a good matchup. No Kirk Cousins in a good matchup. Osborne and Hawkinson will get targets, and Hawkinson will likely get a higher ADOT with no Jefferson, which has kind of been his big issue. So that's a positive for him. But I think the guy who's going to benefit most is obviously Addison. Addison, I was willing to use him at 59, despite the fact he'd had, I believe, a nothing burger the week before. But like his role is pretty good there. Again, 9 targets is a solid number. So if we assume there's no Jefferson, I would say an appropriate salary for Addison would probably be honestly like $6,800, given that he'd probably project for around 7 to 9 targets, gets downfield work, good enough quarterback, even if he's downgraded, and a good matchup. So I'd say 68 for Addison, and he's 67, so that's not a bad number. And I could see myself being back on Addison once again next week. Obviously, his FanDuel points per game is inflated by touchdowns. He's had 3 so far in 5 games, but the yardage has been there too. So I don't think that's a totally bad thing. So Addison, 67, not a bad number. Hawkinson checks in at 67 as well. So that's actually pretty fair. And I might be okay with that too. So hopefully Jefferson is okay because we don't like missing guys like him. But I think that that's pretty enticing for Hawkinson and for Addison. Anthony Richardson was ruled out Sunday with a shoulder injury. Sounds like he'll miss 4 to 6 weeks, according to Diana Rossini of The Athletic. Gardner Minshew took over and helped the Colts get a win here. And Minshew has played pretty well this year. He's at 0.10, passing that expected points per dropback, which is roughly league average. I think it's pretty much status quo for Michael Pittman and Josh Downs if Richardson does miss. But the backfield would be at less of a threat of getting pilfered at the goal line, which is a good thing for them. They don't get as many good rushing lanes with Minshew as they do with Richardson, but they do still benefit in that way. Zach Moss, though, is not going away. So even though we can be okay with the backfield, I don't know which guy we should go to because Zach Moss, 80% snap rate. Jonathan Taylor did not play nearly as much. 195 yards from scrimmage for Zach Moss, 8 out of 13 red zone chances. So Moss has done enough to earn as some sort of role going forward. I would guess that this transitions to eventually be more of an even split, kind of a gradual ramping up of Taylor, and then Taylor will eventually take over. But with Moss playing well, I think that just kind of drags up the timeline. And the bummer is next week they're facing the Jags. That's a fun game with Jacksonville. Pretty good rush defense for the Jags. So maybe we wouldn't be here regardless, but I think we're going to see a timeshare. So I don't really want to be here unless Moss's salary is super, super low. So let's just check here to see where Moss is out of curiosity. And his salary next week is 74. That's not low enough for me. I think I need a bit lower given that I expect Taylor to get more work. It's a good, a tough matchup with Jacksonville. So 74, a bit too high for me. Taylor is at 65. That's also not low enough to tempt me. So probably a stay away backfield for me right now. But we'll check back on them later on as things evolve. But at least for right now, probably a no-fly zone for me in that backfield. James Conner left Sunday's game due to a knee injury and did not return. Amari DeMarcado filled in and played a 77% snap rate, 10 carries and 3 targets for 57 yards. Keontae Ingram was inactive for the second consecutive game with a neck injury. So we still don't know what that backfield would look like if Ingram were to be healthy. Ingram was playing ahead of DeMarcado before he got hurt. DeMarcado, undrafted guy. Ingram has been at the team for a while. So I want to be skeptical of this backfield until we get word from the coaches or reporters that one of these guys would be the lead dog. Or if Ingram misses time, then DeMarcado would still be fine, although they would have someone else active on Sunday. So I want to be skeptical here if I can of this backfield, just because I do think that if Ingram is healthy, he'll mix in. They'll have someone else active on Sunday. You'd have to assume they get somebody to fill in here. So I would like to be low on DeMarcado if I can. But if Ingram is out again, maybe I will be forced in there. But, I think that there are still reasons to be lower on DeMarcado than what we would think based on the snap rate in Sunday's game. Daniel Jones left Sunday's game with a neck injury. He's had issues with his neck before, so that is a pretty big concern as far as his availability going forward. Tyrod Taylor came on in relief and played well, but they were already way down, so likely a very prevent defense. I don't think Jones was the biggest issue with this offense, but obviously he wasn't playing well himself either. We were not considering the pass catchers here before, so I would love to just ignore them, but Darren Waller did kind of come back to life. 11 targets, 86 yards on Sunday. 3 of those targets were deep. Now, Tyrod Taylor is a competent backup, and it does seem like Saquon Barkley should be back soon enough, which would help this entire offense. So they're facing the Bills Sunday. They are 14.5-point dogs. They probably should be. I hope Jones is okay because neck injuries are always kind of scary. But I don't think it's a huge, huge shift. It's a downgrade to Taylor, but not a massive one by any means. So largely status quo for the Giants with a slight downgrade. Finally, Tank Dell left to be evaluated for a concussion for the Texans and did not return. Now, led to some decent usage for Dalton Schultz. Dalton Schultz had 10 targets. His previous high for the season was 7. Schultz had a deep target and has a deep target in 4 straight games. He also has 5 red zone targets this year. So I'm not itching to use Dalton Schultz, but he'd be more viable if Dell were to miss time. Robert Woods, probably the same role. I would say Nico Collins, maybe a slight bump up. Didn't do a whole lot Sunday. they're facing the Saints next week. I do like the Texans broadly, but if they're missing one of their key pieces, facing a very good defense, probably not super itchy to get there if Dell does miss time. But I hope Dell's okay because he's been a really fun player to watch in his rookie season. Let's talk now about some key role updates from week number 5 and start things off with Cooper Kupp. He returned on Sunday and he was just kind of typical Cooper Kupp, but also Puka Nacua, also his typical self. Kupp had 12 targets, Nacua had 11. Nobody else on this team had more than 5. Kupp played almost every snap. So did Tutu Atwell. Van Jefferson was the guy who got the squeeze here. Atwell had 5 targets. 2 of those were deep. Nacua had 2 deep targets, and Kupp had 3. So I don't think the debut for Cooper Kupp could have gone any better than what it did. But also, same is true for Nacua. So I think that this situation is what we've been saying pretty much all along, where it's Cooper Kupp, his typical self, and then Robert Woods all over again, with Nacua being Robert Woods. And those are pretty good roles to have. And next week, they're in a pretty good matchup, taking on the Arizona Cardinals. High total game, 46.5. Rams are 6-point favorites in that game. So if I put Cooper Kupp in that matchup, maybe not full Cooper Kupp because still some concerns around the fragility of the soft tissue stuff, that's a concern still. But Kupp with a lot of deep work, a lot of overall targets from a quarterback who's playing pretty well, that to me is probably worth around $8,700. And Kupp is 87 on the button, so that makes a lot of sense. Very okay with him there. As for Nacua, thinking about, again, Robert Woods-ish type role, good amount of targets, not as much, not a ton of deep work, but some rushing attempts too. I think that's probably also worth around 81, and Nacua is 79. So even though we have both Kupp and Nacua here, I still think both those guys, Kupp at 87, Nacua at 79, both well worth their salaries for week number 6, especially in that very good matchup. So the Rams still get to be very fantasy friendly. Gotta love that. And I'm excited about this team going forward from a DFS perspective. Breece Hall also got unloaded for the New York Jets in this game. 22 carries for Breece Hall. His previous high for the season was 12. He had 3 targets, so 28 carries plus 2x targets. Previous high there was 16. And also, Hall was effective and still had that typical home run ability. So Hall's looked good, and the offense is more competent than it was a few weeks ago. He's getting more work. All that adds up to make him a very enticing guy. In week number 6, they're facing Philadelphia. They're 6-point dogs at home, but again, he's playing well. They want to lean on him. A very tough rush matchup with that interior defensive line. The Eagles do encourage you to throw the ball against them, but I do think that the arrow has to be up in a pretty significant way for Breece Hall. So when you consider all this, I would say an appropriate value for Breece Hall is probably around $7,600 in that matchup, and he's at 68 once again. So it's a very tough spot, very tough matchup. But Breece Hall, talented guy, getting more work. They're at least at home, and he does get work in the passing game. I think there is enough there to make us feel really, really good about Breece Hall at 68. I think he's the biggest value we've seen thus far in the salary scroll. So Breece Hall is a guy we'll be talking plenty about as we get ready for week number 6. 68 is probably too low for him. I also don't mind that passing game, though, because the Jets are letting it rip a bit more. They've said they want to stop coaching scared with Zach Wilson. And Garrett Wilson's been getting more high leverage targets when they've had this more let it rip style of approach. Wilson has a 32% overall target share this year, but he had 2 deep targets for the second consecutive game. He also had 3 inside the red zone, and it was his 3rd straight game with multiple red zone targets. And here's the shift for the Jets. The first 3 weeks, their early down first half pass rate was 41%. The past 2 weeks, it is 60%. So they're going much more balanced. And I think that's a very positive thing for Breece Hall because it gives him more rushing room, but also for Garrett Wilson. And I think that we're going to see a big game from Garrett Wilson in the very near future as a result of this new approach from the New York Jets. They are missing likely Elijah Vera Tucker. Sounds like Mekhi Becton will be okay at least, but some issues along the offensive line for the Jets against the Eagles could be a big issue. But as far as Garrett Wilson goes, I feel like he should probably be around $7,200 for this week, just because again, it's a matchup where you're encouraged to throw the ball against them. He's getting a lot of work, getting more high leverage work. This team is throwing a bit more. I think that's a pretty good formula. Garrett Wilson's salary is $6,900, so he's a bit of a value too. That does mean we'll likely be invested in a couple of Jets against a very good Eagles defense, and that can be very scary. So I get if you get nervous about that. Very, very fair, but I do think we want to be on the Jets at least a bit. At least good for bringbacks. If you want to go with Hurts, AJ Brown, guys like that, at least we do have bringbacks in the Jets in Breece Hall and Garrett Wilson. Going all the way back to Thursday, DJ Moore went nuts for the second consecutive game. 10 out of 28 targets. He turned that into 230 yards. And if you look at the two games for this Bears offense with no Chase Claypool, DJ Moore has a 34% target share with 39% of the deep work and 29% inside the red zone. Cole Kmet, also a 23% overall share with 23% deep. So he's actually been getting high leverage work and a 43% red zone share. So this offense looking better with Justin Fields. We've got DJ Moore. We know where the ball is going to DJ Moore and Cole Kmet. That's a pretty good formula. Next week, they're taking on the Minnesota Vikings, and the Bears are at home. They are at home for that game. 47.5 point total. The Bears 3-point dogs at home, despite the fact there is no Justin Jefferson. I think they're kind of fun. DJ Moore's salary, still some concerns around the offense. I'd probably say 79 for him. And he is 8,000, so appropriate. Kmet, I would say $5,600 is probably appropriate for him. He's 61, a little lofty there. And then Justin Fields, again, running a bit more. He's been more efficient. Pretty good matchup. I would say 8,000 for Justin Fields, and he is 85. So the Bears a little bit spendy. I think it makes sense because that game occurred Thursday, so FanDuel's had a lot of time to react to that game, but they're not totally out of play, just a little bit higher than I'd like them to be, given I'm not fully sold on that offense just yet. They've had a couple good matchups. Not a bad matchup against Sunday, but still maybe a little bit lower than market for that. Devon Achane continued his run of dominance on Sunday. He turned 11 carries and 1 target into 165 yards. Now, that volume is not great, but part of that is the score. I do think that the volume will increase as the efficiency goes down. Like, if their goal is to have him out there for one series, if he busts off a 55-yard carry, you're not going to get a lot of carries. So as the efficiency goes down, I think the volume will go up. So no, you would not use Achane if the volume were to stay steady. But I think it will increase even as Jeff Wilson eventually gets back involved with this team. Miami next week is a 14-point favorite against the Panthers. So that's probably not the spot where you want to get super invested in Achane. I did see his salary before. I was scrolling before and happened to see it. His salary is $9,000 on FanDuel. I get it. That might be my breaking point. I think that if I had played Name That Salary without seeing it, I probably would have said closer to like 83 or so. So a little bit higher than you want it to be. I get it. And again, I think that his volume will go up as the efficiency goes down, but a little high for sure. He's probably where he should be now. So Devon Achane, you made it $9,000 on FanDuel. That's like the 99 club on Madden, I would think. So it's fun to see him there. Just not sure I will necessarily get there myself. Alvin Kamara had great usage once again on Sunday. He had 22 carries and 3 targets, 97 yards from scrimmage, and he also had 6 out of 9 red zone chances. And that's a big key with Kamara because Taysom Hill is there, and he can take away goal line work, and he still will. That's not going to go away. But Kamara is getting really good usage, even with solid competition for targets in this offense. And I think that is a massive thing for him. Now, the Saints are probably never going to play in games with super high totals. They get the Texans next week. That total is 40.5. It is tied for, it's actually the lowest on the main slate as of right now. But even with that, like, I had some Kamara Sunday, despite the fact that game was gross. I took the under on that one, despite the fact it was a very low total. I think that he's worth probably around $7,800 given that role. Like, his role is better than 78, but the offense and total and overall game environments does downgrade him. So I would say 78 is appropriate once you consider all those negatives involved, and he's 75. So I'll probably be on Kamara once again this week. just because he's still getting a lot of work in towards the goal line, getting a lot of targets. I think that game is a lot better than the Patriots game was this past week as far as game environment. So I would bet that I'm on Kamara at 75 once again for this week. I think Breece Hall is the better value between the two, with Hall checking in at 68 and Kamara at 75. Mixon also better salary or better value, but running back once again, I think is going to be a good week to spend the mid range via Kamara, Mixon, and Breece Hall. Devontae Smith had another down game on Sunday. He had 5 targets, but just 1 catch. That brings Smith's target share this year down to 22%. AJ Brown is at 33%. Dallas Goedert 18%. I think that Goddard is pretty status quo, and it was good to see him finally have a good game on Sunday. Was heavily on him, so I felt pretty good there. But Brown, I think, is separated more from Smith this year. I can't recall who it is, but there's been someone on Twitter. Kudos to you. I don't recall where this has come from, but there's someone on Twitter tracking first look reads, and AJ Brown's getting a lot. So it seems like they want the ball in AJ Brown's hand. I think we should react to that because Brown has 3 deep targets this year or per game this year. Smith is at 1.4. So Smith will have a big game, and it'll likely come soon because he's a very good football player. But within your Jalen Hurts stacks, I would say it's okay to shuffle more allocation towards Brown than you were. Like, I think for me, like if I had 10 Hurts lineups, I'd probably have Goddard in most of those. Just kind of as like, pair your tight end with whatever game you're stacking. I would probably have Goddard in most of those, and then I would probably skew like 7-3 in favor of Brown over Smith. Whereas coming into the year, probably 6-4, but slowly pushing that more towards AJ Brown because AJ Brown is very, very good. Do you want to check Devontae Smith's salary? Because like sometimes you'll see guys like him get a massive reduction, and there are too many Smiths. He's 73, so no reduction yet for Devontae Smith. AJ Brown's 82. That's not bad. Probably see some Sauce Gardner on Sunday, but Eagles passing game pieces aren't too restrictive. That game's not terrible, honestly. I know it's a 42-point total, but I'm not totally opposed to that game. Looking forward to next week. The Falcons were forced to throw a bit more on Sunday, and it led to pretty good usage for Kyle Pitts. He had 11 targets with 3 deep and 1 inside the red zone. Drake London also had 9 targets with 2 of those being deep. Pitts now has a 21% target share. London is at 20%. The Falcons will still run when they get the chance to do so, and they're not going to be the most efficient targets. Desmond Ridder played a lot better Sunday, which is good. But if it's a negative script, you can at least feel better about those 2 guys than you did before. They're facing Washington on Sunday. That's probably not going to be a super negative script, so not necessarily leaping to get to them next week, but just in general, feeling a bit better about them than I was before, given the targets getting slightly more concentrated around those 2 guys. With Treylon Burks out, DeAndre Hopkins finally had a big day. He led the Titans with 11 targets and turned that into 140 yards, but no touchdown. 4 of those 11 targets were deep. So you need to go to Hopkins in spots where they will throw, but Hopkins is going to get a really nice target share, especially when Burks is out. They're in London against the Ravens next week. Totally fine spot to go at DeAndre Hopkins. If you're playing like the single game slate, air up for him a bit. It's not going to be, again, the most efficient targets, but he's getting healthier, and I think that will lead to pretty steady target volume for him. Jameson Williams had a predictably limited role in his season debut, played a 47% snap rate, earned 3 targets, and even without Amon-Ra St. Brown, targets were pretty spread out here. So I think the big takeaway from Williams coming back is that Williams will probably eat into Josh Reynolds as a secondary option. Reynolds played great on Sunday, so like maybe not, but like I think that'll be the guy who gets downgraded. I think that maybe eventually he dings Sam Laporta, but Laporta is also playing great. They get Detroit on Sunday. That game is also kind of fun. So, lines are good. Maybe the secondary pieces here are not going to be as fun because of Williams ramping up. Not on Williams yet, but I don't think it impacts Amon-Ra when he's healthy or Laporta just yet. Even with Zay Jones being active, the Jags still had pretty concentrated usage on Sunday in London. Calvin Ridley, Christian Kirk, and Evan Engram all had 8 targets. Engram now has 8 targets in 4 consecutive games. ETN had 5. Travis Etienne had 5. So the passing game usage for Etienne has continued to be better than it was last year. And his red zone role has also been better than it was to begin this year. As mentioned before, the Jags are in a pretty fun game next week, taking on Indy. This is a repeat divisional matchup already because they played back in week 1, but like not a bad game. So thinking about ETN, I'm guessing FanDuel probably juiced up his salary because he did well in the London game early. So I'll probably be below on him. But all things considered, I would say ETN's probably worth around $8,200 right now with how he's playing. Oh, he's 77. Oh, how about that? So Travis Etienne, I thought he'd be 8,000. Think he deserves that, but he's $7,700. So Travis Etienne is probably going to be a focal point for me in week number 6. That's a lot of work for a guy at 77. So, oh boy, I think I'll be very into Travis Etienne this week. Very excited about that. I think he might be my favorite play we've seen so far, even above Breece Hall and above Joe Mixon. Evan Ingram, 8 targets, 4 consecutive games, tight end. Better this week, but still not perfect. So I would say that's probably worth around 6,000 for Ingram, and he's 55. So that's not bad. Maybe we're just going to get a discount on all Jags. I guess no touchdowns yet for Ingram. That's probably why his salary is lower, but like that's still pretty good. So Evan Ingram 55 is pretty fun. Like ETN, just out of curiosity, I kind of want to check to see where Calvin Ridley and Christian Kirk are. This is the same matchup where Kirk didn't get a lot of work in week 1 because they said it was more of a zone-based scheme, which means it sets up better for Ridley. So I would say Ridley 77 is probably appropriate. I hope he's in the lower 7,000s though. He is 7,000. Hey, okay. We're in on the Jags in week 6. They are our Jags. It's going to be a fun week to be on the Jag. Let's see what Lawrence is. 76. Okay, that's fine. But like in general, the Jags undervalued. ETN 77, Ingram 55, Ridley 7,000. All those are really, really fun for week number 6. Marquise Brown had double-digit targets for the 3rd time this year. He's up to a 28% target share for the Cardinals. Also had 2 deep targets, or he's at 2 deep targets per game, and has a 42% deep target share. And he's playing really well. He's my favorite bring back on the Cardinals right now, even with the backfield being in flux. I think that Brown is also in play for one-offs if his salary stays low. They're facing the Rams next week again. Pretty decent game, I would say. Total is 46.5. I think that Brown probably worth around 68, 69 or so. He's 7,000, so that's appropriate. But I don't think it's out of play by any means. I'd rather have Ridley at that number, personally. They're the exact same salary, but good. I'm excited to have Marquise Brown being a fun player once again. I was in on Rashee Rice a bit this week, and his snap rate had been going up, but it went back down Sunday, so I feel pretty lucky to have gotten by with a touchdown in that game. 30% snap rate for Rice. He ran 10 routes on 43 dropbacks. He does have 5 targets in all but 1 game, and he's getting a lot of work inside the red zone, but I don't think I can really do that again until things change. Kansas City is playing Thursday, so if you're playing single game looking for a value play, it would depend on Rice's salary, but to keep in mind that the red zone work is kind of boosting his outlook here. I would also say Isaiah Pacheco played the 2nd highest snap rate of his career on Sunday. So for that single game slate, 10-point favorites against Denver, against a very leaky Denver rush defense, Isaiah Pacheco breakout, hopefully incoming on Thursday. We're always pretty desperate for tight ends, maybe less so now, given what happened this past week. But I thought it was noteworthy to see Logan Thomas get good work for the Commanders. He led the team with 11 targets. In the 4 games he has a 17% target share. That's actually tied to Terry McLaurin for 2nd on the team. Jahan Dotson leads the team by a smidge. I really can't get to any of the receivers right now. They're not efficient enough to deal with those middling target shares, but Thomas is at least a consideration in the right spots. Next week, Washington is facing Atlanta, so that's a pretty good matchup for them. Don't mind that. So if we get Logan Thomas in the low 5,000 range, I think that'd be pretty interesting. And his salary is 54. Okay, so that's not bad. I do prefer Ingram, I think, at 55, just because I like that game more. But Logan Thomas at 54 is not bad either. So not bad. I can live with that for Logan Thomas for sure. And tight end might be another good week to spend in the mid range, in the mid to high 5,000 range once again. Finally, Dameon Pierce's role is getting a little bit better for the Texans. He's squeezing Devin Singletary out of the early down work. Singletary has 20 plus adjusted opportunities or carries plus 2x targets in 4 straight games. His snap rate has increased and force rate as well. So they're a bad rushing offense. I wish they would stop running the football. It's annoying to be on the Texans and watch them run because they can't do it very well. But air was slightly up from where it was with Pierce. I'm not going to check his salary because I don't want to get tempted against the Texans, or against the Saints, but it's better than it was for him. Let's finish up here with our salary scroll for week number 6. I've already found some guys that I like quite a bit, some salaries that are pretty fun via the Jets and Jags primarily, and also kind of the Eagles too. So feeling pretty good about how things set up entering week number 6. Let's go to quarterback now and check out the landscape there. Jalen Hurts is 87. The Jets are a very, very good defense, but it's Jalen Hurts. That offense looked a lot better on Sunday than it had before. That might be kind of interesting, even though the Jets are a tough team. There's no Mahomes on this slate. There is no Josh Allen on this slate, no Justin Herbert on this slate, no Lamar Jackson. So quarterback actually really thin. That's probably why Justin Fields got shoved up to 85, is because there wasn't really anybody else to put in the 8,000 range. Tua's 83. If there is a lack of upside at quarterback, then a guy in a super positive script becomes more viable. So 2 at 83 is not terrible. I think that does make me like Trevor Lawrence and Joe Burrow more in this mid 7,000 range. Also, Matthew Stafford potentially at 73. Yeah, I guess not a huge, no upside from Stafford yet. Maybe that does exist with Kupp being there, but the lack of running, he does need to get you 350 and 4 to really be a great play for DFS. I mean, like a great play for DFS. So probably shouldn't go to Stafford, rather go to Lawrence and Burrow, but also Brock Purdy. I know the Cleveland defense is amazing. So I probably shouldn't even bother, but like he's playing out of his mind right now. I won't get to Purdy because the ceiling's kind of muted to begin with. It's a tough matchup, but like he's just playing great right now. So good for him. Scrolling down further, I don't mind Goff or Mayfield in that game. It would probably need to be super high in that game for stacking, which is kind of to be determined as of right now. But Geno Smith is 68, taking on the Bengals. That could be interesting. The Bengals defense, I think I have a lot of respect for them, but they haven't played great yet this year. So that could be kind of interesting there as well. Don't see anything else in the low 6,000 range. So it's probably going to wind up being Hurts despite the tough matchup, just because it's Jalen Hurts and it's a kind of a thin slate of quarterback, maybe Tua, but then also the mid range with guys like Lawrence and Burrow. Moving over to running back, Christian McCaffrey is 10-3. He's worth it. I'm not going to fight back against that. I get it. I get it for sure. Achane, $9,000. Let's scroll down here, try to find some other running backs here. Kyren Williams, let me check his snap rate from Sunday, because obviously didn't do a ton, but it was a tough spot. He still played 86% of the snaps. So I'd expect a better game from Williams next week than this past week. $8,200, I think is very fair for him. And I can get behind that one. So probably going to be in on him for a bounce back. But again, my gosh, Travis Etienne, 77. Really good number for him. Bijan Robinson did not work out for me on Sunday. He had a fumble, didn't get a ton of work. So that was annoying. 76 is not bad. Washington can't be run on, so he's okay. Kamara, I think I like a bit more at 75 against Houston. And ETN I like more. So this range is good. ETN 77, Bijan 76, Kamara 75. That's a really fun range. DeAndre Swift also had, I thought, pretty good usage once again Sunday. Did not get a lot of red zone work, which was his big downfall, but I still like him. Again, I respect the Jets a lot, so don't want to go too heavy on the Eagles, but 72 for him and his workload is good. Same with Joe Mixon, 7,000, Breece Hall, 68. So again, mid-range at running back, I think is going to be the sweet spot for week number 6. Scrolling down further, Rachaad White is 63. The Lions have played great, but White's role has been pretty good. Only 1 touchdown so far. He hasn't had the best production, so I'll have to dig more in the matchup there, but just in general, 63 for Rachaad White did get my attention, I would say. So might be back there. Amari DeMarcado is 59. That's probably high enough where I can be skeptical and be okay with it, especially if Keontae Ingram is able to play for next week. So main highlights for me are ETN 77, Kamara 75, Mixon 7,000, and Brees Hall at 68. I think all those guys, pretty good salaries. So the mid-range running back is going to be fun in week number 6. Moving now to wide receiver. Scrolling down here, because we talked a bit about Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua. Amon-Ra St. Brown, if he's able to go at $7,800, that's a good spot against Tampa Bay, where Tampa Bay should be able to score some points depending on if Mike Evans can go. Evans is 76. He had a hamstring injury before the bye. Sounds like it was pretty mild, though. So maybe we'll wind up there. DK Metcalf 75 against the Bengals. That could be okay. Not totally opposed to that as well. Scrolling down further, again, Calvin Ridley at 7,000. Do like that quite a bit. T. Higgins 7,000 too, if he's able to go. Garrett Wilson 69. I think next week might be the week where they're in a negative script. Probably going to have to throw quite a bit. They've been willing to throw more often, and in general, Philly does encourage you to throw against them. So that actually might wind up being a pretty good spot for Garrett Wilson at $6,900. Scrolling down further, Addison 67 again, fine. Not a massive value by any means, but pretty good. Ooh, Tyler Lockett 66. Why is that? That's weird. That seems really low. Lockett he had the one game where he had to leave early. That was week 1. Hasn't had big yardage upside, but I believe he's been getting deep targets. Let me just check that quick. Because I don't want to be spewing nonsense here. Okay, so Seattle. Lockett, his deep share is 32%. Metcalf is at 37%. But like that gap is probably too big between those two guys. And Lockett also has a 33% red zone share. So Tyler Lockett at 66 coming off this bye week. That's fun. Even though the yardage has not been there yet, I think it will be eventually. So Lockett at 66 is probably going to be a guy I'm on in the mid-range at receiver for this week. Scrolling down further at wide receiver, not seeing a ton that stands out to me as far as values go. We're down $5,500 now and not seeing a lot that jumps off the page. Yeah, I think it might primarily be the 6,000 range, 7,000 range, looking at Lockett at 66, Addison's in there, Ridley, Marquise Brown. Those probably going to be the key guys for me. If there's no Mike Evans, maybe Trey Palmer. Didn't earn a lot of targets in week 4 when Evans left early, but might have had, I haven't checked, maybe some Marshawn Lattimore in the mix there. Palmer has not been a big target guy so far, not a big yardage guy, but might take it in. But in general, I think this slate really does revolve around the mid-range. Jonathan Mingo is 49. Maybe I'll be there. Probably shouldn't. Facing the Dolphins, he's probably going to be a pretty popular bring-back option for people who decide to use the Dolphins. And I'd probably prefer him over Thielen because Thielen's 74. Mingo might be worth looking into at 49. So, yeah, okay. Not totally opposed to that. So maybe he's the one like potential value play for next week. Tight end, Sam Laporta, Baby Gronk, 68. We've made it. Our boy has been elevated. He's the highest salary tight end on the entire slate. Love it. TJ Hawkinson, 67. I think if we assume that Amon-Ra St. Brown plays, I probably would prefer Hawkinson 67 over Laporta at 68. Laporta deserves to be there, but like Hawkinson would get a lot of work, would probably get more deep work if there's no Jefferson. So probably prefer Hawkinson if there is no Jefferson and Amon-Ra St. Brown plays. Dallas Goedert back to 62. Kmet 61. Oh boy. George Kittle's 59. People probably going to chase that big game last night, but he only had 4 targets there. So I would say buyer beware with George Kittle because a little bit flimsy usage, and we haven't seen a ton from him in the games that Ayuk and Debo have played. So proceed with caution. I know Kittle will stand out at 59, but like make sure we're not point chasing there. Much prefer Evan Engram at 55. Again, 8 targets in 4 consecutive games. Pretty good game against the Colts. Like him there. Kyle Pitts 53. Probably not going to throw a ton, so I don't really want to do that personally. And then Dalton Schultz again, if there's no Tank Dell. 52 is not bad for him. It's not great, but it's also not bad. Scrolling down further at tight end, not seeing a whole lot that stands out to me right now. Yeah, I think that probably is about it. So Engram to me, pretty enticing. TJ Hawkinson enticing. I think in general, it's a good week to like look at the mid-range. I think the mid-range might wind up being our favorite range for week number 6, just because got good running backs there, got good pass catchers, not as much need to spend up at quarterback. So it might be a good week to just kind of avoid value plays, get you undersalary guys in the mid-range who get good usage and use that as being your core for week number 6. We'll talk more about that on Thursday during the preview show at Brandon Gadula. That'll be live on the FanDuel YouTube page at 10 a.m. Eastern, also up on FanDuel TV Plus and the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed after we are done recording for that day. That is all that I have here for today. If you got any questions for me, you can find me on Twitter at Jim Sannes, JimSannes. You can also follow FanDuel Research at FanDuel Research. If you want some thoughts on tonight's Monday Night Football game, broke that down over on the Covering the Spread podcast feed. Talking player props. I like the total in that game as well. So check that out over on the Covering the Spread podcast feed, the FanDuel YouTube page, and FanDuel TV Plus. Want to thank you all for tuning in for today. Good luck to you with your lineups if you're playing single game for Monday night. We'll talk to you once again Thursday to give a full preview of week number 6. This has been the Heat Check Fantasy Podcast right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network.